I've only seen 30 movies so far that released in 2018, and I still have plenty more to see. Like Climax, like Widow, like Suspiria, like First Man, like Shoplift, like Cold War, like Searching, like 8th Grade. That having been said, here are
my favorite movies that I saw in 2018!
Subject to change, of course. So, I guess I've got a few brief honorable mentions to start with. Game Night. The best part of this movie is honestly the cinematography. There are a lot of aerial shots that make cars and houses look like board game pieces, which I genuinely didn't expect from what I assumed would be a dumb comedy. Speaking of which, the comedy in this movie works. For me. I found the jokes were landing, and as far as I was concerned, I was having a good time watching it. Avengers Infinity War. There isn't much that hasn't been said already about this film, but being the culmination of about 18 films before it and not being a complete mess of a movie is something worth praising. While not all of the elements from those 18 films are present in this one, it does feel like the beginning of a conclusion? Some of a conclusion? I don't know, it works for what it is. What I took away from this film was how compelling the antagonist Thanos is, despite his plan not making any sense when you really think about it. Being centered mostly around Thanos serviced the film really well. Mission Impossible Fallout. Directed by Christopher McQuarrie, this movie is a non-stop train of fantastic action where real people are doing real stunts. Because of that, the movie feels real. It's worth a watch for at least the action set pieces and stunts alone. Yeah, so,
Number 13!
Won't You Be My Neighbor? This is a documentary about Mr. Fred Rogers and his philosophy on children's entertainment. Mr. Rogers is as genuine as any one person can get, and this look into his life on television is genuinely fascinating. We see how society changed from when he started the show up until his death in the early 2000s, and how children's entertainment began to treat children as idiots more often than not, where Mr. Rogers' neighborhood remained the same in terms of treating children with respect intellectually. If you're looking for a feel-good movie, then this is one for you.
Number 12!
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. The Coen brothers happen to be among my favorite directors, and this new embarkment of theirs into an anthology film is genuinely great. Each of the 6 stories in this movie are unique, have different themes and messages to tell, and all feel like different genres despite sharing a Western setting. While some of the stories are longer than the others, and certainly feel it, I'm talking about you, number 5, the beauty of this format is that if I were to go to rewatch this movie, I could just pick whichever of the stories I feel like watching at that particular time. The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is on Netflix, so any of you with an account have no excuse not to watch it.
Number 11!
Mandy. Dark, gritty, supernatural, beautiful cinematography, weird philosophy, and Nicolas Cage. I understand that Nick Cage isn't exactly a box office draw like he once was, and his recent lineup of films have been stinky doo-doo. But Mandy is an exception. This film is an example of a director using Nicolas Cage right. The man isn't always the best fit for each role he's cast in, but he 100% works in Mandy. I'd describe this movie as perfect B-movie schlock, but I think that'd be a bit of a backhanded compliment in a way. This movie knows exactly what it is and owns every bit of it. It's one of the most interesting movie watching experiences I have ever had. Emotions ranged from, oh god, that's gross, to,
yes, this is exactly what I wanted to see! Number 10!
You Were Never Really Here. Joaquin Phoenix plays our leading man in this film. His character is ex-military who clearly has been traumatized from his experiences, and for a living, he gets paid to track down and rescue children who have been captured in some sort of a human trafficking ring. This movie gets more complicated from there, so I won't go on for the sake of not spoiling it. I can see some people possibly being bored with this movie, but for me, it hit.
Number 9!
Hereditary. An atypical horror movie with an all-time great performance by Toni Collette is right up my alley. Hereditary is the kind of horror film I've been waiting for a very long time. There is a scene in this film that I will not go into that hit me in such a way that I realized after a few minutes that my mouth was left wide open, and it wasn't even the climax of the film. I'm in love with the concept, and most importantly, I'm in love with there being a horror movie that isn't a remake, reboot, sequel, adaptation of anything else, while also feeling genuinely unique and new. I did not know what direction this movie was headed in, and that's not the fault of the movie. Hereditary definitely benefits from repeat viewings. You'll be sure to find elements laid out in the beginning of the movie that gets paid off in the reveals later on. Cinematography, directing, acting are all on point. And even that kid from the Naked Brothers band did a decent enough job.
Number 8!
Sorry to bother you. Having a unique experience is something that I really look forward to with each new film that I watch. Sorry to Bother You is completely unique. The plot follows an African-American man, played by Lakeith Stanfield, who gets a job at a telemarketing agency and only sees success when he begins to put on a white voice, which is voiced by David Cross, the whitest-sounding man of all time. We follow Lakeith Stanfield's character through this wild and unique journey and how this new identity affects his relationship with the people who were in his life from the start. I can honestly say that you have no clue where this movie is going when you watch it, and it's well worth a watch. It's hilarious and thought-provoking while remaining wildly entertaining through its presentation.
Number 7!
The Sisters Brothers, Wild West mercenaries sent after a chemist who can divine gold in bodies of water, starring Joaquin Phoenix, again, Jake Gyllenhaal, Riz Ahmed, and Dr. Steve Brule himself, John C. Reilly. Let's check it out.
Let's check it out. Shut the camera off, save the batteries.
Check it out!
Directed by Jacques Audiard from France, this film is not like most other westerns. It feels a lot more personal in terms of its characters instead of the grand rootin' cowboys of the John Wayne era. The vistas shown in this film are so beautiful. Its score may be used a little too often for my liking, but I did enjoy it on its own anyway. Jake Gyllenhaal and Joaquin Phoenix, in my opinion, are two of the best working actors we have today in Hollywood. I believe that they are these characters that they're portraying. Even John C. Reilly feels like his character, despite how strongly I see him as Dr. Steve Brule.
Number 6!
Now, I have a bit of an odd relationship with Burning. I was very excited to see this movie when I first heard about it in the beginning of summer 2018. I even went to South Korea that July, which just so happened to be when the movie released there. Alas, if I were to go and see the movie, there would be no way for me to really understand it. I may know some Korean, but not nearly enough to sit through an entire film without English captions. It took until February of 2019 for me to be able to find Burning on VOD in the United States, and I was finally able to watch it. I loved it. Yoo Ah-in plays the main character, who is an unemployed man with a creative writing degree who forms a relationship of sorts with a woman he meets from his childhood. Steven Yeun, of Walking Dead fame, plays the antagonistic role in the film, and he speaks Korean for the entire film. I'm told he actually does a really good job speaking and acting in Korean. Steven Yeun's character has been compared by some to Gatsby, but I don't really see it outside of the two being wealthy. I'd describe this movie as a thriller where Yoo Ah-in's character is suspicious of Steven Yeun's character, whom he believes is manipulating people and things in his life. It's possible the story that we're being told is either entirely genuine, or it's just the distorted view from our protagonist. Regardless, there are a lot of deep-seated metaphors in this movie, and it seems to me that everyone takes away something different from this film. I watched this with 3 people, and each of us took something completely different away from the film. Burning is honestly a really good conversation piece between friends, and the only thing keeping it from having a higher score for me might just be the 2.5-hour runtime. Regardless, I really appreciate having seen this movie, and I'm excited to watch it again sometime.
Number 5!
The Favorite. Now, this is one of 3 movies on this list that I've already made videos on. I'll only add that I think this movie is really approachable for most people as opposed to Yorgos Lanthimos' other filmography. The acting is all phenomenal, as well as the sets, costumes, and score. Olivia Colman totally deserved her Oscar win for Best Actress at the Academy Awards. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet.
Number 4!
Isle of Dogs. The title is even a play on words. Isle of Dogs, I love dogs. This is the best stop-motion animated film that I have ever seen, hands down. Something I really appreciate in films is when people of a particular language group are speaking that language, and this holds true for Isle of Dogs. It's set in Japan, and the people are speaking Japanese. But there are instances where translators are there to tell us in English what's being said. The decision also services the story in that we're meant to be following the story of these dogs abandoned on Trash Island. These dogs, just like monolinguistic English speakers, wouldn't be able to understand what those humans would be saying. There are sets and locations in this film that seem vast and open in terms of its environment. It's the sort of thing that you wouldn't really expect from a stop-motion film. Typically, stop-motion films have smaller sets, and there isn't much of a sense of scale with distance. Some would say that all Wes Anderson movies are the same, and I do take issue with that. Sure, he likes to shoot his films in the same manner and have his shots look as symmetrical as possible. But we have to remember he is able to perfectly replicate this exact style in stop-motion, where he typically would be doing it in live action. I encourage everyone to give this movie a shot and challenge them not to find one thing that they don't like about this movie.
Number 3!
Roma. Once again, I have covered this movie already. Roma is just a beautiful experience to watch. Alfonso Cuarón is a master of his craft.
Number 2!
Go watch this movie to support high-concept sci-fi. It's gosh darn fantastic and deserved way more than it didn't get.
Number 1!
The Death of Stalin. I will concede that this movie may not be the best framed, shot movie of all of the movies that I saw from 2018. That would probably go to Roma. But this is a list of my favorite movies from 2018. And The Death of Stalin is my favorite. It's hilarious, it's got a great story, and almost most importantly, it's historically accurate for the most part. There are characters in this story reciting horrific events to their peers in a way that would make it seem like they're regaling on a funny story that they had happened to them once, or that they had witnessed once. These high-ranking members of the Communist Party of Russia under Joseph Stalin were just so warped. The moment that the glue holding them all together, Stalin, goes away, we find them all trying to scheme and backstab each other in an effort to get power. Like the title says, this movie is about the power struggle over the vacuum left by the death of Stalin. If you know history like I do, then knowing the outcome of this doesn't lessen the progression of the story in the slightest. Armando Iannucci, writer and director of this film, knows how to masterfully craft humor with serious dark topics and situations. While a lot of the movie is very humorous, there is still always the threat of death, torture, or worse befalling any of the characters. I'm not even sure that there is a protagonist of this film, since each character is reprehensible in their own right. But if I had to choose, it would probably be Nikita Khrushchev, portrayed by Steve Buscemi. Now, I know that I just said that I prefer characters of a particular language group to be speaking that language if they are not outside of that language group. But, for some reason, it doesn't bother me as much in this film. We have characters with American and English accents portraying Russians, and I'm fine with it. I don't believe any of them could convincingly speak Russian, let alone act in Russian, which would mean that they would have to be recast. I would rather have the actors that we have in this film than recast them. Honestly, it was the most entertaining movie of the year for me, so it's my favorite of the year.